When we picture the American Revolution, our minds often conjure images of men. Powdered wigs in stuffy Philadelphia rooms, soldiers huddled at Valley Forge, generals on horseback. These images are not wrong, but they are incomplete. They tell only half the story. The other half, the story of the women of the Revolution, has for too long remained in the shadows, a footnote to the grand narrative of our nation's birth. Yet the war for independence was not won by men alone. It permeated every aspect of colonial life. Women were not passive observers. They were active participants, essential architects of the new nation. Their contributions were as vital as any musket fired or declaration signed. Imagine the world of the 18th century. A woman's sphere was almost entirely domestic. Her life was defined by her relationship to men, daughter, wife, mother. Her legal identity was often subsumed by her husbands under the doctrine of coverture. With husbands, fathers, and sons away at war, the American home front was transformed into a new kind of battlefield. The responsibility for maintaining colonial life fell squarely on the shoulders of women. Farms, shops, businesses were now under their command. A woman who had previously managed a household now found herself plowing fields, sowing crops, harvesting grain, often to supply the Continental Army. She became a farmer, a bookkeeper, an artisan, a manager, all while raising children and defending her home from the uncertainties of war. The survival of her family and community depended on her ability to adapt. The economic sacrifices were immense: salt, sugar, cloth nearly impossible to find. Women organized spinning bees, weaving homespun to replace British textiles. Homespun was practical and political. For these women, the war was a daily test of resilience. Beyond the settled home front, another group of women played a direct and vital role in the war effort: the camp followers. These were the thousands of women, wives, sisters, mothers of soldiers, who followed the Continental Army on its marches. They were not an official part of the military, yet they were utterly indispensable to its functioning. Washington tried to limit their numbers, seeing a drain on resources and mobility, but he knew the army would collapse without their labor. They rose before dawn to fetch water, to gather firewood. They cooked with meager rations, washed lice-infested clothing, and mended garments. Work crucial for sanitation and preventing disease. When the army moved, they packed up, rounded up their children, and trudged for miles. They faced harsh weather, poor nutrition, and constant danger. Their role as nurses was perhaps their most important contribution. They cleaned wounds, changed bandages, and offered what comfort they could. Women like Sarah Osborne recalled stepping over the dead and dying at Yorktown to bring food and water to soldiers in the trenches. Not trained nurses in the modern sense, their tireless care saved lives and brought humanity amid brutal war. Despite this, they were mischaracterized or ignored. Bound by loyalty, love, and survival, they became the logistical and emotional backbone of the fight for independence. Long before Lexington and Concord, women were at the forefront of resistance. As the Stamp Act and Townshend Acts inflamed tempers, women organized as Daughters of Liberty. Their resistance happened in the home, boycotting tea and textiles, turning domestic choices into political declarations. In Edenton, North Carolina, 51 women led by Penelope Barker signed a resolution to boycott British goods, an unprecedented act. Mocked as unfeminine, they stood firm. They took to the streets, confronting merchants and officials who defied the boycotts. Public, forceful, determined, shattering the ideal of the demure female. In Philadelphia, Esther DeBert Reed and Sarah Franklin Bosch raised extraordinary funds for soldiers. When Washington asked for supplies, women bought linen, cut patterns, and stitched thousands of shirts. This was politics in action, practical, effective, and driven by women. Not all were patriots. Loyalist women saw rebellion as a terrifying civil war that tore their world apart. They faced scorn, violence, and confiscation. Grace Groden Galloway recorded the devastation of exile and loss. Many became refugees, their letters filled with loss of home, community, and identity. Their stories complicate simple narratives of good and evil, and reveal the human cost of upheaval. For women not of European descent, the rhetoric of liberty rang hollow. Some seized the chaos to flee bondage. Lord Dunmore offered freedom to those reaching British lines. Refuge was harsh, digging trenches, cooking, washing, amid disease and predation. Thousands were evacuated at war's end, but many were betrayed, sold into the West Indies, or abandoned to enraged former masters. Most native nations sided with the British, rightly fearing American expansion. Indigenous women, central to politics and economies, urged resistance. In 1779, the Sullivan expedition burned more than 40 Iroquois towns, homes, crops, orchards, striking at women's agricultural heart. Economies shattered, political power broken, families driven from ancestral lands. For Indigenous women, American victory began generations of dispossession and forced removal. The revolution for them was a catastrophe. Softly, we must hold their stories in full view of our triumphs. While most served from home or camp, a few stepped into forbidden roles. They became spies and soldiers and propagandists. In British New York, the Culper Ring relied on women, including the mysterious Agent 355. Lydia Darrah risked everything to warn Washington of an impending attack at Whitemarsh. Deborah Sampson fought as Robert Shirtliff, wounded twice, extracting a ball from her thigh to keep her secret. Discovered ill, she was honorably discharged, her story challenging gender itself. Mercy Otis Warren's pen-shaped opinion then recorded the revolution for posterity. Peace did not transform women's legal or political rights. Abigail Adams's plea met affectionate dismissal. But a new ideal, Republican motherhood, cast mothers as guardians of civic virtue. This demanded women be educated, leading to academies and seminaries for rigorous study. They studied subjects once reserved for men. It elevated women's domestic work and opened doors to future claims of equality. Graduates became leaders in abolition and women's rights. The nation was not only founded by fathers, but by mothers as well. Their legacy lives in the questions they raised and the precedents they set, a quiet revolution echoing through generations.